Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 76 of Behind the Camera with Andy Games, the podcast where we shine a light on the storytellers, the creatives, and the voices behind the camera. This week, I'm joined by Dr. Kurt Ellenberger. A professor of music at Grand Valley State University, Dr. Ellenberger's focus on music and evolution paired together will leave you looking at music in a whole different light. We talked about why we as humans resonate with music on an emotional level, the mathematical patterns in music, and both the scientific and philosophical blend in how we react to music. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to stay connected, all of my links are in the About section from socials, merch, website, and much more. Hitting follow, sharing the show, or leaving a quick rating really helps Behind the Camera grow. Now, here's the interview. Kurt, welcome to Behind the Camera podcast. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show tonight. How are we doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Andy.
Oh, very welcome. My absolute pleasure. So, Kurt, you are a retired jazz / classical pianist, I should say, composer and author. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into music and composition.
Sure. I really got hooked when I was about 12. I watched NPR in Detroit, which was the public radio station in Detroit, and they had a TV station too. And I heard some classical music. I heard Gustav Holst's The Planets, and I was transfixed. I had just never heard anything like it. And I also heard Duke Ellington. Mm-hmm. And so from that moment on, I was just completely enamored with music. And I tried to figure out why does this music sound so good, and how did they write this? So for me, it was a process of being really moved by a couple of different pieces, and after that, you couldn't get me out of music with a team of horses.
Incredible stuff, and obviously that kind of fits perfectly into sort of the theme of what you specialize in regarding music, and that is the kind of emotional connection that people have to music and the sort of what it does to sort of our sort of brain chemistry, for example. So and you obviously found that when you heard classical music and jazz, and that's something that you teach now to people, would be the sort of connection between emotions and music.
Yeah, that's something that I started doing in all of my classes about probably 15 or 16 years ago, something like that, because the students have such a deep connection with music. But they would ask me questions. Well, why do we have these emotions when we're listening to music? And I started to explain it to them, and then I realized I should do this with every class. And so I started getting deeper and deeper into it, and that's what really I don't know. I really get a kick out of that, because we're using music all the time, but most people don't have any idea of how it actually works. And that story, I think, is astonishing. It's curious. It's weird, but it's amazing.
Yeah, of course. And so was this something that you kind of studied yourself, like the emotional connection to music, once you sort of realized it yourself, that's what kind of put you over onto wanting to learn music? Did you kind of study this then after the fact, and that's kind of led you on to teaching it?
It was definitely after the fact. I did, in my undergraduate, I did a music degree, but I did pretty much most of the minor for a physics degree, and I focused on acoustics because I had that kind of nagging question: why do we respond to this like this? And the acoustic background really helped me to frame it in a way for the students some 20 or 30 years later that I think made sense, because I had that kind of scientific background, but I also have the creative background. So if you put those two together, you come up with some pretty interesting answers.
Yeah, of course. And, it's funny because whenever we first started talking about you coming on the podcast, the first thing you said was about the, emotional connection to music. And that was something that deeply resonated with me, as, like you say, it deeply resonated with a lot of your students, and I think it does kind of have a sort of connection to everybody, because music does make you feel things, and even going deeper than the sort of major minor chords, representing happy, sad, for example. There is just, you could have a bad day, listen to a song, and it just sticks with you no matter what it is. There's just something, and it is like such a fascinating topic, like about how it really just kind of sticks with you and really kind of can alter your brain chemistry, as it were.
Absolutely. So, a funny story. When I present this in class, I'll ask the students to go to the board and tell me what music does to you. Like, how does music alter you? And they go up and they say, well, it pumps me up when I'm working out. It helps me get to sleep when I'm stressed. Um, it makes me happy when I'm depressed. It brings me down if I'm too up. And so I go on the board and I say, well, look at what music does to you. It does the same as a shot in a beer or illicit drugs. So I joke with them, if music were invented today, the government wouldn't allow it because it alters your brain chemistry.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. It would be definitely. But yeah, so and obviously before we started talking, you kindly sent over a couple of articles and some visuals as well. So I think it would be kind of good to just sort of talk around these as well. So the first article that you sent over was in regards to music and evolution of humans, and this was an article that you had wrote yourself on all about jazz. So like, if you, yeah, what can you tell us just about this, just in your own words?
Well, I guess a good place to start is what if I play you a little example, and then I'll ask you to sing the next pitch if you can sing, or just to tell me where you think, what distance you think it should go.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm no singer, but I'll happily I'll happily point in the
Okay.
direction.
Okay. So here we go.
um,
Putting you on the spot here.
yeah, for sure. I would say one below, and I don't have a reason as to why. I would just say one note below from the last one.
Okay. So here's that note. And it's the end of the tune, right? So you expected that note, and that's a C.
Mm-hmm.
So the curious thing is, I did not play a C in any of the previous leading up to that final cadence. So where did you get the C from? So your brain was doing something, and at the end of that, it instantly knew. I think it should go down one. It should go from here. You heard that note, but yet I hadn't played it.
Yeah, like I think for me personally, it kind of comes down to, well, I don't want to go as far as say chord progressions or something, but maybe like the kind of the melody, and it kind of almost like felt like it had reached the sort of highest point that it was going to get, to the point where it wouldn't have made sense for it to go any higher. And I think the tempo might have affected that as well. So I feel like because it was starting to slow down at that point, if it was to go higher, it wouldn't really make sense in my head.
So yeah, so definitely, and I try to keep that one slow, but it works kind of the same way in faster pieces too. So what's happening here is I'll have to go into a little bit of the physics to kind of describe what's going on, and that's where some of those diagrams might be really helpful to look at.
Mhm.
So to start out, I'll just play the C that you heard. So if we go an octave below that, we have another C. I'll play them both together. If I go an octave up, Now I was playing three different notes, but we call them all C, even though they're completely different pitches.
Yep.
But our ear somehow hears this C, and then when we hear this one, we hear them as kind of the same note, only the second one is higher.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, but in reality, looking at it from a purely scientific perspective, they're completely different pitches. So this is something quite curious, that humans hear them as a higher and lower version of themselves, and that's what the word octave means. So we even give it a name because we've recognized that they are so consonant that they sound like the same pitch, except one is higher than the other.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So the reason that happens is because you can show it. This would be a good place to put the diagrams in.
Yes.
So diagram 2 shows a string that would be playing the C. So you pluck the string and the C sounds. And diagram 3 is the C above it mapped onto it. And what you see is that the string length for the C above it is exactly half the length of the C below it. So when the second wave comes in, it's extremely symmetrical because it divides the string length into 2. And the next C up divides it into 4. So if I do this, I would have to divide the original string length into 4, and it would sound this pitch. If I divide it into 8, it would sound this pitch, and so on. So that number series is called the binary series. So we're going 2, 4, or 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. Older listeners like myself would remember that that's what you used to be able to buy the computer memory in, because your entire computer is based on the binary series. So what we're using here, the foundation of it requires the use of that binary series. And it's not only in computers, but it's also in the very beginnings of life. So when a sperm meets an egg, now you have one cell, and that cell divides and you have 2, and then those 2 divide and you have 4, and then those 2 divide and you have 8, and so on. So this binary series, the symmetry of it sits pretty deep in life in general, but in music, it's showing us all of the C's are based on a binary series based on the length of string to make that note sound. So that's kind of interesting, right? So if I play 2 C's, we say, wow, they sound good. They sound like the same note. Here's 2 C's. But if I play a C and a B, it doesn't sound the same. Or if I play a C and a D flat, so we hear those notes and we grimace. So that's a curious response too. When we hear the 2 C's together, we say, oh, that's consonant. That's really nice. But when we hear some of the others, now we're horror movie time, right? So what's happening there is that your brain recognizes the symmetry and the simple math of the binary series. And when it hears that, it says, yes, that's a simple wavelength or a simple relationship between the 2 wavelengths. And we understand that. Why? Because we understand the power of 2. So, for example, if I asked you to fold a piece of paper in half, could you do it?
Yeah.
Could you do it in 4?
Yes.
In 8? Depending on the thickness of the paper.
Yeah, it would depend, but
yeah. But it's easy to do theoretically because it's all based on 2. Mm-hmm. If I ask you to fold that same piece of paper into 11, now we're in trouble. Now we've got problems, right? So it's the same. Your ear is doing the same. Your brain is doing the same thing. Your brain hears instantly that this is a simple relationship between these waveforms, and it's symmetrical. So if you look at example 3 and 4, you'll see more C's mapped out, and it starts to look like a beautiful geometric, like a flower almost or something. The last example shows what happens when you take the symmetrical waveforms that are all based on 2, and you insert, I think there's a 13 in there. So I'm pushing a 13 against an 8. So the ear, your brain, hears that as a complex waveform, and your brain says, I don't like that. I want a simple waveform. And so your brain actually supplies you the closest solution from the complex to the next power of 2. So if you're hearing a 13 or an 11 or a 9, your brain is saying, please, give me that 8. That 9 is just too complex. It's the symmetry's not there, and your brain supplies the solution for it. That's why you heard the note that should have been sung when you said, well, it should be the next note down. You were right. But that was your brain doing a mathematical calculation saying, that's a complex waveform, but if you go down 1, you'll turn the 9 into an 8 and everything's simple again.
That's fascinating. That's honestly incredible. And like, is that something that has been like engineered into humans right from like the sort of earlier days of music? Like if you look at like, say, some of the classical artists, like, like Bach and Beethoven, would that be something that the listeners at that time would have also kind of felt too?
Absolutely. I think it's probably been going on as long as there's been humans making music, because that feature of our auditory system is what allows a composer, or what allows music to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we didn't have that, then music wouldn't have that expectation of, oh, I can't wait for the chorus to come, or I can't wait for the end of the tune. It has this resolution. If we weren't filling in those simple waveforms, we wouldn't be able to have a narrative quality in music. So if I play it's satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Because I gave you what you expected, but I could also not give you what you expected.
That still works.
That still works, but it surprised you, right?
It did, yeah. Like,
because you were expecting the other one, but then as a composer, I can go a different direction,
mm-hmm.
and in doing so, I create a story.
Yeah.
Right? I create a narrative that pulls you in, and you're saying, well, wait a minute, when are we getting to the resolution? Oh, well, we're going on a little journey this way first, and then we'll eventually get back and give you the final resolution of the chord.
I like that a lot, because if you compare like sort of the two little clips that you played there, right? You take the first one, you have the penultimate note, you immediately think, okay, it's going to go down 1, and then compare that to the second clip you played, and then you have this almost like a little bit of a bridge that kind of takes you away before the final note after that. So you're adding in a couple of little notes before, and that sort of pieces it together in a way that becomes a lot more fluid. Like, I think that is just like, well, it's like you say, it's storytelling, and because I think it also kind of gives the listener a chance to, once they kind of have been kind of not tricked as such, but it wasn't what they were expecting, gives them that kind of couple of beats to sort of catch up and be like, this is where it's going then.
Yeah, exactly. And without that, we wouldn't have music.
Mm-hmm.
Without your brain filling in the note that it expects, anybody writing music wouldn't have that power to either give you what you're expecting or to foil it and have a plot twist and go in a slightly different direction. So, and yes, this is all types of music. Pop music uses this, rock and roll uses it, jazz uses it, classical music is based on it. So any music where there's melody and there's tonal harmony, this is what it's based on. It's tapping into that mathematical system that we all have hardwired into our brains.
Yeah, of course. And going back to classical music, that's like the earliest sort of form of music you can really kind of sort of think of. like, would that sort of then have inspired all the different genres because music is essentially kind of formed around, obviously you have chord progressions, you have different key, you have kind of everything that what classical music would have used in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So before the music era, uh, classical era is actually about 1750 till the early 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Way back, we had Gregorian chant. That was really the first
Okay.
music that was in the church, and out of that grew that classical tradition. So we had the Baroque era with J.S. Bach. Then we had classical era with Mozart, Romantic era starting with kind of late Beethoven and Brahms and so on. So we had a good maybe 250 years of that classical tradition using this system and really mining it for all it's worth.
Mm-hmm. So was it essentially just kind of transposed from the chants from just pure vocals onto instruments and then kind of further developed from there?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So and there was a lot of debate about that, whether instruments should be used, especially in the church. And so it grew out of that vocal religious tradition, and then eventually went into ensembles and larger groups. And by the time we get to the 1700s, we've got symphonies starting up.
Yeah. That's kind of crazy how when you break it down like that and you sort of look at how much music has developed from its earliest form to now, and like and sort of disregarding AI and AI music, but like up to the point where you can digitally create music, and that even
Yeah.
still, just with a couple of pushes of a button, you're still able to sort of invoke that sort of emotional reaction that you get just because it's something that is like 500 years old that is just sort of you're now able to just press a button and you've got this kind of melody almost that just does things to you as a person.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because when if I have students listening to Bach, for example, yeah, and I kind of teach them how to listen to it or show them how you listen to that music that's different from listening to pop music, and they're listening to something that was written, you know, 400 years ago or
Mm-hmm.
300 years ago, whatever it is, and yet they're getting it. So they're being spoken to by a mind from 1725, right? Which is really quite remarkable. That communication is still there. That music is still able to deliver a message from that long ago. It's absolutely remarkable.
100%, yeah, because like even so many years on, these are the people who are still being talked about. These are the people who still
Yep.
have like the classical pieces to this day, and
Yep.
a lot of sort of artists in between. Well, we'll even go from like say the 1900s.
Hmm.
Probably more who have been forgotten about than have been. And it sounds so harsh to say, but like it's kind of obviously like back in the day, the like the Bach, Beethoven, they were like they were the inspiration. They sort of were what inspired more modern music, and
Hmm.
then that kind of sort of the inspiration kind of got harder to kind of pass down onto sort of younger generations after that. So you think about how many sort of artists would have started, and then you have like if you break it down into like particular genres of more contemporary music, you probably only have like a number of like artists groups who really would hold that sort of worldwide renowned status, who have been inspirations to younger generations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting because when you look at the development of that popular music, they quickly started to access the classical composers to get more harmony and more melody because the original pop music was pretty simple. But even by the time you get to the Beatles, they've got George Martin working with them, and he's a classical pianist and conductor, and he brings in all of these different harmonic things and orchestra stuff. So it's interesting how that music influenced pop music in a way that I don't think many people know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like a full circle thing when you think about it, because you have like all these sort of like more contemporary bands like pop music or anything like that, no matter what the genre is, it all kind of goes back to classical. And like you say, they're bringing in kind of classical musicians to sort of help amplify their sound, to either make it, I don't know, to kind of give it a more kind of original twist, or make it sort of stand out or something like that. But I kind of feel like no matter what way it's utilized, it's always going to fit. And it's kind of interesting considering how many different genres of music you've got, but you can still kind of put some classical element into it and it will fit.
Yeah, and then if you go too far, it's not pop music anymore.
Yeah.
So so you think of like I think the Beatles were right on the edge of that, but then as soon as you get past that, you're into bands like Genesis or Pink Floyd or Yes, and it's so complicated that most of their tunes don't really work as radio play pop music.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they brought so much of the classical or maybe jazz elements into it that it's too complicated. It doesn't quite work as 4 or 5 chord pop music anymore. It's still great, but they had to come up with a new name for it, and they called it progressive rock.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And like, even if you look at like, say, dance artists and stuff like that, they will full on use like adagio for strings, for example, is probably a good example. And I'm not sure when I know it was written a very, very long time ago, but that got turned into basically a rave song in like the sort of
really?
early 2000s. Yep, adagio for strings. DJ Tiesto is like he basically did his own version of it, turned it into a full blown dance song, but it keeps the same. It's the same from the original recording, like in the intro of it, and then it just kind of breaks out, and it works. Like, I think that was like one of his most popular songs like at the time. Like, it's just kind of but like what's kind of interesting to me is that, like, even if like it doesn't have like that kind of impact on everybody, there will definitely be a number of people who will look back and be like, oh, where's the, let me look into the, where did they get this sample from? And then they kind of fall into like a rabbit hole of like classical music.
Yeah, and you get pulled in because that piece is so gorgeous and evocative, and it has such a deep melancholy sadness to it at times. That's one of those pieces that it sort of gets a little bit ruined for me because it gets used so much. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to hear this version. It was in the movie Platoon, I believe. It was like the
yes.
Yeah, and several others too. So it has these visuals that were kind of tacked onto it that I can't listen to it in the same way. So I'll look up that version.
Yeah, like it's and it is quite interesting because it is such a melancholy song. Like, it is, all in minor key, which is obviously meant to kind of invoke that sort of level of emotion, but it was turned into a really influential dance track, and just and nobody nobody who goes out clubbing listens to dance music is sad. Like, because it's meant to be that kind of poppy, upbeat sort of tempo that you're getting, but that's why it's so like fascinating. And like so definitely, like I will, after we have this conversation, I'll send you the YouTube link for it as well. Like, it's it's something else, but actually kind of brings us on quite neatly onto the second article that you sent over about minor chords being perceived as sad, which is, it's something I think that anybody who's ever listened to music will probably notice, that like there is that kind of sort of lower tone to it that just kind of invokes that kind of, yes, this song is going to be sad, this is going to have some deep themes. But why is that? And like, in terms of the major and minor chords, like, why is that? What is it that kind of invokes that kind of reaction in humans?
Yeah, so this is the first example that I sent you, is a, staff with the harmonic series on it. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get too technical, but basically when you play a note, any note, or make any sound, it's governed by that harmonic series. And what that means is there's a series of notes in the harmonic series, and they're shown on that diagram. So if I play a C, yes, I'm playing that C. That's the primary pitch that I'm playing. But that note has partials of many other notes in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it follows the law of the harmonic series. So the next note up from the C that it's going to have some amount in is another C. So that's the second partial. The third partial is a G. The fourth partial is a C. And the fifth partial is an E. So those notes are contained in that bottom note. So think of it like a soup. If you say, okay, we're gonna make lentil soup. What are the ingredients? Well, it's not just lentils. Lentils is probably the main ingredient, but you're also going to put a little garlic, onions, maybe some spices, maybe some parsley, some mushrooms, or whatever. You're still eating lentil soup. So if that's an analogy you can kind of go with, the C is the lentil soup. The main ingredient is C, but it's got a lot of other ingredients in it that keep going higher. So the reason that the major chord is used is because it's the first 5 notes in the harmonic series. So again, C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we put those together, so when you play a major chord, you are emphasizing what's already there in the bottom note.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it sounds good, because you're making louder what's there in the background quietly. If you play something that's not that, then you're fighting with what's there naturally, and that's partially why it sounds so dissonant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually kind of fascinating how the chords are made up. So like on a piano or a keyboard, like it's C, E, G. That's the C chord,
Yep.
yeah. And is that obviously you've explained it and all, but is it just because like it's just a tonal match in terms of C, E, and G, and that's why? Because obviously if you just have a C note, that's like a third of the chord. When you look at it like that.
Yeah. So again, it's what you're doing is you're reinforcing what's already there.
Mm-hmm.
So the E and the G are part of the C. So when you sound a C, the E and the G are sounding in the ethereal ghostly realm, which we call a partial, because it's made up partially of that pitch.
Yeah.
So when you play those together, you're reinforcing that, and because they're already there, they sound good together. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Like, and I don't know if it's because of the setting you have your keyboard on, but it just sounds, when you played like that sort of the C's in different octaves, like it just sounded like triumphant, like a fanfare almost, and it just kind of, it sounded positive. Like it sounded positive because, on like the topic of the minor chords, that's like a completely different thing. But even though the chords are still very, very similar, they're still anchored by the main note that you're playing, whether it be A up to through to G. And is it the other 2 notes that are different, or is it 1 or 2?
So when we go from the major to the minor, so here's the C, E, G. So there's the major chord. All we're doing to go to minor is we're lowering the E to an E flat. All of a sudden, it's spooky. It's Halloween time, right?
Yeah, you've just gone from royal fanfare to haunted house in about 2 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So why do we hear it like that? So that's the question. So a little bit more about those partials. They explain why instruments sound the way they do. So a trombone, you can imagine a trombone has a really rich, deep, powerful sound. A flute has kind of a much lighter sound than a trombone. The reason that the trombone is so rich is because its harmonic series, from the way it produces the tone, emphasizes the odd numbered partials. So it emphasizes the five, it emphasizes the major third, it emphasizes seven, nine. So those are very rich pitches, whereas the flute emphasizes even numbered partials. So it's not bringing anything new into the pitch. It's just reinforcing what's already there. So that's why instruments sound the way they do, because they reinforce different sets of partials based on how they produce the sound.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, it's because like I played music myself for a number of years. Like I played guitar
Hmm.
since I was 15, and I've always knew the the difference in terms of how to play the chords. Like, you know, like going from
Hmm.
like an A to an A minor. And I always noticed that there was just that sort of difference in terms of one note needed changing. And that's kind
Hmm.
of what made all the difference. So like just to sort of understand why that is incredible. And like it makes so much sense about how it just fits as well, because like it could
Yeah.
really be it could like from the start it could have just been anything to that could have made it sound better, and that could have been the difference between a major and a minor. But like the fact that it just still follows this little scientific pattern that as humans we're sort of engineered to just understand without even knowing why.
Yeah. Well, it relates back to our earlier discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that we hear the minor as sad is because the major, if I play that C again, the E is in it. It's
Mm-hmm.
sounding the E and it's pretty loud. It's not inconsequential because it's the fifth partial, and so it's quite present in the C. So when I play the E flat against it, we now have a really strong dissonance between the played E flat and the ghostly realm E natural. So it's almost like the evil twin brother has come in and usurped the throne and and taken it away from the king, who's now in hiding. So the E in the harmonic series is in the dungeon, and his evil brother, the E flat, the minor third, has taken over. But the king's presence is still there, and that's what I think we're hearing. We're hearing this dissonance. We're hearing that
Yeah.
dissonance not as strong. We're hearing the E flat, but we're also hearing in the background, locked away in the dungeon, is the E natural in the harmonic series, because that doesn't go away.
Yeah.
That's still part of the C. So what's happening there is your brain is hearing, it wants to hear the consonants of the E, but it's a half step lower. And that dissonance is there, but it's not super pronounced because you're dealing with a partial, not the two notes actually played together. So what we're hearing in the minor key is a complex dissonance between the E flat and the E natural that never gets resolved.
Yeah. Understand.
And
Yeah.
so and that invokes a feeling of sadness, of melancholy, because we want to hear the complex waveform resolved to a simple waveform, but in the minor key it's so close to the major key that we've accepted it, and actually it's an element of music that expresses a realm of human emotion that music would be entirely bereft without.
Yeah. Definitely. Like it's incredible to me because you have like your chords are sort of dominant. Your minor chords and major chord are dominated by a note that isn't even the chord that you're playing. So like the C chord dominated by the note of E,
Hmm.
because you know it's you could go from an E to E flat, and that is the difference between a major and a minor. It's just like, and is that like specifically because it's in the middle of the C and the G, and that's why it's
Yes.
always the middle note in for every chord.
Yes, and that's something that acousticians and musical theorists have argued about for a long, long time. Why is the minor chord there? Because it doesn't appear in the harmonic series until, oh, I don't know, 16 or 17 or 18, no, 17 18 partial, 19, I forget what it is. So it doesn't appear till way up high in the harmonic series. So why do we accept it as a stable chord? And yeah, that's kind of the answer that we've got is that it splits. So from the C to the G is 7 half steps, and the E is 4 half steps up from the C. It's 3 half steps up, 3 half steps down from the G. What the E flat does is it flips that. So instead of a 4 on the bottom, we have a 3 on the bottom. And instead of a 3 on the top, we have a 4 on the top. So it splits the middle between the C and the G like that. But really, it's close enough to the E that we accept it as a stable chord. But it's fighting with the E natural in the ether, right? In that ghostly realm of the harmonic series where the partials live. It's still fighting with that. There's still a strong dissonance there, and because it never gets resolved, it's sad.
Yeah, that's honestly mind-blowing to me. Like, genuinely, because as I say, like, I've played music for such a long time. I've always thought I've had somewhat of an understanding in terms of sound, but like, just sort of when you really kind of understand why these things are the way they are, that's like a whole new kind of level of just sort of how you look at music. Like, that is, because that applies to every form of music, you know, whether it be instrumental, vocal, everything, like, and yeah, my mind is blown.
Yeah, when you realize that the kind of the mathematical underpinnings of it, but we don't even know that we're doing the math. It's just done automatically, and then that math, based on either symmetry or asymmetry, is what gives it its emotional power. We kind of shy away from, or we grimace at the asymmetrical, and we smile when things are symmetrical. And what composers have done is create this amazing musical narrative over centuries that utilizes that skill and creates stories of every kind imaginable: happy, sad, melancholy, reflective, angry, tragic, you name it. They've crafted that mathematical that mathematical story to be able to do that.
Yeah. You know, and I absolutely love that, because like, being a fan of storytelling as well, just really kind of seeing how simplistic it can be just to tell a story. And like, sometimes all it takes is just a few notes, a few chords, and it just kind of, the rest just kind of comes with it. Like, that is just absolutely fantastic. That's tremendous. Like, I've never truly understood it. Never truly understood it this way, like, until this conversation. And it's like, you know, it's certainly eye-opening, to say the least. You know, having like listened, I think I'd listened to music for the better part of 25 years. And I think so, like, anybody who listens to music, they kind of notice these things. Maybe not a lot of people really think on why that is. They just accept it. And I guess that's the mathematical formula in our brains kind of just going to work. It's just something that we are hardwired to do. And when you really kind of understand why, like, oh, wow, that's, I'm lost for words.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen often.
To me, it's not like demystifying it. To me, it's even more mysterious. Like, why do we do that? Right. So that's what I looked into in terms of evolution. I started asking a friend of mine who's an evolutionary biologist, why do we fill in the missing note? What in terms of evolution, right? What would being able to fill in the missing note to a proto-human, 150,000 years ago, what advantage would that give them in terms of procreation, or in terms of resource, be able to hunt more, or to find more food? I just couldn't come up with an answer.
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah. It's like one of those things as well, when you really kind of get deep into it, it's like, why does it follow this kind of specific formula in such a neat way that's so comprehensible to humans without really having to actually understand it? like, what are the chances it could have just been one little thing could have been different, and all of a sudden minor is major and everything
Yeah.
is just, but that becomes the norm. Like it's, like it's, because like whenever you sort of showed me the example earlier on of you played a C and a B together, and it just didn't,
Hmm.
it was just a total mismatch.
Hmm.
And it kind of got me thinking then. It was like, what if that was normal? It's just so it's like by this almost divine chance that a chord sounding as neat as it does is the and like, I mean, maybe it's dangerous territory if you really want to think about why that is, in terms of like, why isn't it this, why didn't this happen, when you trace it back so many years. And it's I mean, I'm happy enough in knowing that it is just part of our genetic makeup as humans, that it
Yeah.
just is, right? Because I kind of feel
Yeah.
like you say, the more mysterious it gets, the more terrifying it sounds like as well.
Well, to find that binary series in just built into our hearing,
Mm.
into our auditory system, and our ability to supply from a complex waveform to supply the nearest simple waveform is just it's just so mysterious.
Yeah, definitely. And
And
like,
without it, we wouldn't have music.
no, so true,
We
so
would
true.
not have music. And
Yeah,
without music, we don't have we maybe we would have movies, but what would a movie be without the music?
yeah. Which wouldn't be right, would it?
Wouldn't be right.
No, like definitely. And that's things. I've spoke to a lot of filmmakers as well, and like the heavy reliance on music and it being the right music going into
Hmm.
their product is, insane. Like it has to just be, in terms of key, theme, progression, everything, tempo, it
Hmm.
just has to be perfect. And like, how blessed are we to have music, you know?
Well, Nietzsche said, "Without music, life would be a mistake."
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair. I have to say though, that example you gave to me earlier about what note comes next. I know you have like a YouTube video of that as well. I
Yep.
am honestly going to like try this on as many people as I can think of going forward, because I just want to see other people's perspectives, and I kind of feel like it will probably be a majority will get it right, but I just, but well, part of me thinks as well, the natural skeptic will come into sort of play with some people, and they'll just be like, "Oh, this is a trick question. It's actually meant to be," but it's like, no,
Well,
just go with your gut. Like it's instinct. That's literally what it is.
I've done this in, I don't know, maybe probably hundreds of classes over the years. And when I get to that part and I ask the class to sing the note, they all sing the same note. There's never been anyone that's sung some wild note that is far away from that. So I think you'll find that everyone will sing it. And in the video, actually, I have a little blue tape on all of the C's, so you can see that I'm not playing any C's,
Yeah, of course.
right?
Yeah,
And it is, you think so, sound waves go into your ear, your brain processes them, and then instantaneously it tells your vocal cords to go to this pitch to solve the puzzle. That's really amazing.
yeah. Like it just like brings this sort of extra special appreciation for it. And like, when you look at composers and like, musicians generally who can either learn by ear or just even just it comes out like, writing masterpieces just out of like nothing, because like they're just
Hmm.
well tuned, and it's, now we know why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kurt, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera. Thank you so much for your time. Honestly, the insight has been absolutely incredible into sort of really just understanding music and humans' emotional reaction to it. So, just before we wrap up, I would just like to give you the floor, just if you would like to let us know, where can we find you, just for the listeners.
Sure. I have my website is kurtellenberger.com. That's KurtEllenberger. And you can find my music there. You can find my piano playing there, compositions, and links to other articles.
Amazing. Once again, Kurt, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And there you have it. That brings us to the end of episode 76 of Behind the Camera. Huge thank you to Dr. Kurt Ellenberger for sharing his knowledge and insight. I truly find this conversation so enlightening, and this has truly changed the way that I look at music as a whole. Once again, if you'd like to stay connected and support the podcast, drop a follow, check out my link tree for socials and more, and share the episode with a friend who you think would get a lot out of it. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.